Hello, hello. Good morning, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. See a couple more people signing in, so I'm just going to give them another moment. All right. Well, we have a lot of material to cover in the hour, so I'd like to begin. This is the Report Designer Basic Training webinar. Today is Wednesday, September 12th, 2018. My name is Eric Johnson, and I will be your Windward training facilitator today. I'm a technical support engineer here at Windward. I've been here for just about almost a year now. Been happy to be here. Maybe you've interacted with me through some help desk tickets already, but welcome everybody. So you may have noticed that when you logged into the GoToMeeting webinar, you have a toolbar. The arrow that you see on the screen is pointing to the raise your hand icon. If any time during the webinar you have a question or are experiencing technical difficulties, please feel free to click that button to ask your question or notify me of anything that's wrong. The prompts I have for questions in chat are on my other screen, so I may not see your questions immediately. Usually I wait until the Q&A session at the end to answer the questions, but I'll occasionally check in case something does get posted. Again, this is a basic introduction to Report Designer. We assume that you haven't used Report Designer. Maybe you've installed it, but you probably haven't built any templates. You don't know too much about the interface or how to add tags to your documents. So we'll go over the very basic, the very fundamental things to do with Report Designer. Next week, there's an intermediate training webinar scheduled where we'll cover more advanced features. But for today, it's the machine I'm working on is a Windows 10 operating system, which is 64-bit, and I'm also using Microsoft Office, also a 64-bit. It's okay to use 32 or 64-bit. We recommend using 64-bit as this allows you to utilize all the memory on your machine when building a template and gathering the data from your data source. Because sometimes you're pulling a lot of data and it requires a lot of memory. I think 32-bit only allows you 2 gigs of memory. 64 can utilize all you have in your hardware. And the version of Report Designer that I'm using is 15.2.369.0. You can always find the latest version of Report Designer on our website on the downloads page. Okay, I want to give you a high-level overview of what we'll be discussing today. We'll take a look at what's within the AutoTag and AutoTag Manager tabs. We'll create a simple template using the for each and out tags to create a couple of simple lists. Now, these 2 tags, for each and out tags, the most popular tags that you'll use. We'll go over the input parameters, or what we consider variables, which are used to filter before you generate output. We'll go over a couple data source wizards, more specifically SQL and XML. We'll cover how to generate a report and how to get some help. Okay, Well, we're first going to look at what's in the AutoTag Manager tab. You're not going to access this tab that often. It just kind of gets your environment set up. We'll discuss the data source button, which is what you'll use to connect to your data source. We'll go over the find and replace tool. We'll discuss the about button. We'll look at the license button. So if you're using a temporary key and want to update it to your permanent key, I'll show you where to do this. And I'll also let you know where to get samples and other tutorials after this webinar. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at Report Designer. I'm going to go ahead and open up a blank Word document. This is opening in my other screen. Let me just pull it over. Let me just change the color for a second just to make it a little easier to see. Dark gray, colorful. There we go. Yeah, that should come out a lot better in the webinar. Okay. So when you install Report Designer, there will be two tabs added to your Word ribbon. These tabs being the AutoTag and the AutoTag Manager tab. Let's go ahead and take a look at this AutoTag Manager tab as we were just discussing it in the slides. So over here in the left, in the data section, is the data sources button. And this data source button connects you to your data. So if you're using JSON, XML, SQL, or OData, these are the 4 types of sources that we support. This is where you'll set up your connection. To the right of this is the pods. This can help you speed up development by reusing content. You can get more information on this in our wiki. And also in the data, there's this generate code button. And this is handy for the developer types. It shows you how to generate the code from the template you're working on for our Windward engine. So if you're using the .NET, Java, or RESTful engines, it shows you the code and how to reference the template and actually generate that output. The next thing over here, I'm going to move over to the right into this tool section. I like to point out this find and replace tool, find and replace button. And this is something that sometimes is overlooked. It opened on my other screen, so let me just drag it over. Something that sometimes gets overlooked, but it's a very easy tool that you can use to update all your tags in your template at once. So let's say you created a data source connection and you need to provide it a nickname, and the initial nickname, was good for the moment, but as you're developing the template, it's not as evident as what the data source refers to, so you'd like to go and change it. So instead of going through the document and changing each and every tag, you can use this find and replace tool. You can enter in the nickname of what it was, enter in the nickname of what you want to replace it with, and then you even have an option down here. Say you just want to change the data source nickname for just your for each and for each, and maybe your if tags, or you have an option to select them all. So this is a really handy tool for when you want to update tags all at once. Okay. Another thing that's within this AutoTag Manager tab, I'll talk about the options section. And first, let's go over this About button. So this gives you information on the version of Report Designer that you're using. So as you can see from here, the version I'm using is 15.2.369.0, and it's a 64-bit Word. So also let you know what version your license is good through. 16, it's a version that will be coming out real soon. This key that I'm using is valid through version 16. I also let you know how many licenses, how many systems you can run this key on, this license key on. I'm on 50 systems. This is a super key, so I have a lot. Yours may say 1 or 2, but it lets you know how many systems you can valid to run that license key at one time. I also let you know when the license key is due to expire. Mine won't expire till next year. Another thing that this About pop-up has is over here on the right. It lists the IP address of all the people who are using this license key at the time that you click the About button. So I'm the only one using this key, so I'm the only one here, but if you were in your company and more people want, this is how you could tell if more people are trying to use it than you are licensed for. Okay. Next thing, license button. And this is where you will copy and paste your permanent key. Or if you're performing a major update, say you're actually going from version 14 to 15, then you'll actually need to add your version 15 key here. So if you ever go through a major upgrade, you'll have to add that key here. Or again, if you're using AutoTag Report Designer right now with a temporary key, this is where you will go ahead and paste in your permanent key. Right there in this license button. Okay. So I'd say today, watching the webinar is the best first step to learning Report Designer. Second step I would offer is going to our Windward Tutor, and that is right here. I'm gonna click that button, and again, it opened in my other screen, so let me just drag it over here. Expand it. Ooh. I closed it. Do this again. Drag it over and expand. All right. So this Windward Tutor gives you step-by-step instructions on how to do something. When you open it, we have a bunch of main topics that you can choose from. AutoTag Basics, connecting to your data in AutoTag, AutoTag Tutorials, AutoTag Data Tools, and AutoTag Data Wizards. But then you can also click on one of these topics, which will bring you to another page that has some further subtopics. This AutoTag Basic has 3 of them: inserting a tag, tutorial on the for each tag, and then access and the samples template. I'm gonna go ahead and click on this inserting a tag just to show you what this will look like. And once this opens here, you can see we'll give you some objectives of what this tutorial is going to help you with, and also the procedures on how to complete that objective. We also give you gifts. So for each step, there's this Show Me How button, and if you click on it, this one is just showing you how to open up the AutoTag Manager ribbon. Somewhat simple, but we still give you a gift on the steps to, the visual steps to accomplish what we're trying to inform you of. So again, this is a great second step when building your templates. You can always reference the tutor for step-by-step instructions on how to do something. The next recommendation in Learning Report Designer is looking at the samples that we provide. Also here in the Getting Started Guide, I'm going to click on the Samples button. And here we go. It opens up our Getting Started Guide. And then within here, there's step-by-step, there's tutorials, and there's also these sample templates that I was just mentioning. We're going to focus on this additional section, and then specifically the tag tutorials SQL. We also have tag tutorials for XML. We'll be including tag tutorials for JSON, but we aren't fully there yet. But for this first part of our webinar, we're going to focus on SQL data source. So with that selected, so for any tag that you can utilize in Report Designer, we have a sample here for you. So if you wanted to learn more about the if tag, the out tag, the import tag, the bookmark tag, the set tags, switch tags, we have sample tutorials to give you a guide on using each one of these tags. But I'll go ahead and open up one of these just so you can take a look and see what they look like. Let's go ahead with this if tag. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Let me expand this a little. So here we have step-by-step procedures on how to use the if tag. There's further instructions on how to use the else tag, and so on. So this is a really good resource that if you're trying to figure out how to use some tags, you can always refer to these samples as we give you examples of utilizing them in different ways. And a really cool thing about this is that these samples are connected to our Northwind SQL Server database. It's a public database, so you can actually generate output from these SQL samples. So you can see the output of these samples as you go along, learning how to use the tags. Great next step for referencing the use of specific tags with examples of each. Okay, I'll go ahead and close this for a moment. That's pretty much all I wanted to kind of point out right now in the AutoTag Manager tab. Let's go ahead and get back to the slides for a moment. Okay, so that was the AutoTag Manager tab. Now let's go over the AutoTag tab. And here's where we'll actually use a lot of the features to create a template. We'll create a very easy template during this webinar. We'll be using some for each and out tags. Basically, I'll show you how to select the tag, how to pull your data in from the data bin, how to insert using the wizards for SQL and XPath, how to create an input parameter, and how to generate output. These will be the things that we'll be discussing once we look at the AutoTag tab. Okay, now for an overview of what a for each tag is, excuse me one second. Okay, a for each tag does three things. First, it fetches a set of data or the specific data that you want to utilize within your data source. Second, it can repeat that data through an iterative loop. For example, if you're trying to create a list. And third, it repeats the contents between the beginning and ending for each tag. And the ending for each tag just tells Report Designer when to stop repeating content with each iteration of the loop. The for each tag is a tag that you'll use rather regularly. The most common tag, though, is the out tag. And the out tag is basically short for output. So when you're trying to display data from your data source within your template, when you're ready to display a number, an image, or text, this is when you'll use the out tag. And tags are simply placeholders for your data. The for each tag doesn't display any information. It just gathers the data that you want to use loops through that data and repeats the contents between the tags. The alt tag actually displays the data that you want your users to see. All right, now let's get back to Word and actually start creating a template. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a Word document. Sorry about the cough. I'm not sure where that came on from. All right. So the first thing to do when creating a template is to connect to your data. So I'm going to go over here to the AutoTag Manager tab. And to the left, I'm going to click on this Data Sources button. And this opens up our connection editor. As you can see, the connections, we have active connections and recent inactive. Sorry about that. So right now, we don't have anything connected. We're just starting off a template, and that we can see right here in the active. And then if you have worked on templates recently and have had set up data sources for those, we also give you a list of those recent inactive, the recent data sources that you have set up. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create a data source. So I'm going to select this new tab right here. And there's a couple of different connections that you can set up. We give you ability for Salesforce to connect to. You can connect to your JSON, data, or XML data. And also have ability to connect to SQL data sources. I may have a few more data sources listed here than you do when you first install Report Designer. And that's just because I have installed other drivers on my system to assist other customers with their templates. You can always install different drivers on your systems as well, depending on the SQL environment that you're using. In our wiki, you can find step-by-step instruction on installing them and also obtaining the proper drivers. Okay, for today, I'm going to connect to the Northwind SQL Server database. So I'm going to go ahead and select this last option here. And when you start creating a connection, first field up here is the nickname, and we discussed that briefly with the Find and Replace tool. And so this gives you an ability to define this connection with a nickname. I'm going to be connected to the Northwind SQL database. So let's go ahead and call this Northwind SQL, something that helps me know what I'm connected to. And when you create a nickname, there cannot be any spaces in it. It has to be all one string. Next thing you'll do is you'll type in the server that you want to connect to. I'm going to connect to our public server, one of our public servers, an open server to the public. So that is mssql.windward.net. And instead of entering the database that I want to connect to, so they're doing that right now, I'm going to move over here to this credentials section, and I'm going to enter in my username and password for accessing this server. And those information is demo, D-E-M-O, and same for the password, D-E-M-O. Again, this is open to the public, but you just need this username, password to access this section. Okay, now that I have my username and password set up, I can come over here and enter in my database, or since the system knows that I'm connecting to that server with these credentials, when I click on this dropdown, these are the databases that I have access to based upon my credentials that I've entered. So I mentioned that we're going to connect to the Northwind, so I'm just going to scroll down and select it right there. Beneath that, you have a a couple of different options for display tables. You can hover over any one of those to learn a little more about them. For today, though, we're just going to stick with user. Over to the right here is the read-in metadata, and it's checked by default. There's only a few times there's only a few times that you'll want to turn this off, so you don't pull in all the metadata from the database schema, but this is a great option to keep checked. Okay, instead of entering all this information, if your DBA has provided you with a connection string, you can go ahead and check that box and paste that right in here. And that'll take care of all these other prerequisites. So if you do receive a connection string, you can enter that in directly here. Then they'll continue with just manually entering things. And one last thing beneath that is root directory. And this is for using relative paths within your tags. So if you're referencing sub-templates or images that are on a shared network, you can provide the root directory for a report designer to use to locate those sub-templates or images. Okay, now that I have my server, credentials, database, everything set up the way I wanted to, let's go ahead and test this connection, see if we can actually connect to the data source. I'm going to go down here and click test. And when I do that, down here on the bottom left, data source test succeeded. It's in green. Green is always a good sign. If there was a problem, this would have been some message in red. But right now I know I can connect to the data source. So now that I know that it works, let's go ahead and add it. Click this add button. And when I do that, you can see it was automatically added to the active section. All right, now that I'm connected to the Northwind database, that's all I need to do in this connection editor right now. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. All right, well, after connecting to a data source, Report Designer automatically shows you this database schema over here on the right. And here are all the tables and views that I have access to. You may also have stored procedures that you have access to. These won't be listed here in the AutoTag data bin. They'll be listed in the data tree, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But for now, these are just all the tables and views that I have access to based on the username and password that I entered into that connection editor screen. Okay, now let's get started by creating a basic table. Let's get this template going. I'm going to go up here to the Insert tab. I'm going to insert a table. Let's insert a 3x2 table. Okay, now that the table's in the template, I need to use Report Designer to start tagging up my document. For this example, we're going to use this categories table over here. And within the categories table, there's 4 columns. There's a category ID, category name, a description, and picture. Those are all the columns that relate to this categories table. Okay, let's go ahead and give a hetero to this table. So let's add category name. Let's add a description to this table. And lastly, a picture. Okay, now that we have a hetero, we need to supply data from the categories table. To do that, you'll place your cursor right under the category name table to begin. And tags will be added to your template wherever your cursor lies or is blinking. So when I add a tag to this, it's going to add it right here. That's where it's blinking right now. So I'm going to go over here to the AutoTag tab. And we're going to add a tag now. So I'm going to go over here to this tag section and click on the tags. And here are all the tags that you can add to your template. And if you hover over any of them, you can see a short description of that tag. So to begin with, to get the data, we're going to add a for each tag to this table. Okay, now that it's in the table, I want to point out a couple of things. So with this selected, over here in this for each tag properties section, and whenever you click a tag, see right now that's not highlighted, but whenever you select a tag, you will get this section up here and it will tell you what tag you're selecting. So if you're ever uncertain, if you clicked an out tag, a for each tag, an import tag, whatever tag you're on, you can always click on it and you can see which tag you're working with. Two things I want to point out here. First is this variable. And by default, Report Designer provides you with a variable name for the tags. And for this one, it was given var name 1. And the variable name is just the name that Report Designer uses to reference this tag right here. Let's make this a little easier to understand. Let's change it from var name 1 to let's, since we're dealing with the categories table, var categories. Okay, since it's a variable for the categories. Okay, press enter to make that save. It says, do you want to update all the tags that reference the variable? var name 1, we only have one tag, so it doesn't really matter. Let's go ahead and say no. Another thing that's up here in this tag properties section is the nickname. So right now it's just listed as for each, but to make this a little easier to read when you're working, you can go ahead and assign this tag a nickname. So since we're working with the categories table, let's go ahead and call this categories. And when I press enter, you'll see that the tag has now changed from for each to category. So it's a handy way to always be able to give your tags names so you can easily reference them. Or maybe someone else working on the template who does not know the structure can look at the names, the nicknames, and get a better idea of what's trying to be processed here. Okay, now that we have entered the for each tag to bring our data in, now we need to display that data. So, okay, now, sorry, I got a little in my head of myself. Now that we have the for each tag here, we need to select the data that we want to use. We just assigned it a nickname and gave it a variable. We still have yet to tell the for each tag what data we want it to pull in. To do this, there's a little shortcut up here in the tags property called the data tree. I'm going to go ahead and open that. And a lot similar to what we saw on the right in the AutoTag data bin. Here you can see the tables that you have access to, the views that you have access to, and then here is your stored procedure. So if you do have a stored procedure that you're going to use, this is how you would access it through the data tree. But today we're working with the categories table, so I'm going to go ahead and select that whole categories table. All right, and hovering over the tag, you can now see that it's bringing in all those category ID, category name, description, and pictures. Just what we wanted. Another thing we can do is click on this preview button just to ensure that we are bringing back the information that we want. And here, again, yes, we are. We got the category ID, category name, description, and picture, all which match up over here. So I use this preview button quite often just to make sure that I'm selecting the correct data that I want to see before actually generating the output. So through this tutorial, you'll probably see me use this preview a lot, and it's not just in the tutorial, but I also use this often when working with templates. So the for each tag is now getting the data that we want to utilize. Now to display the data, we'll need to use alt tags. So I'll put my cursor right next to this for each tag under the category name, go back up here to the tags and click and choose the alt tag. And again, now similar to the for each tag, now that the tag is in the template, I need to select what data I want to display in this alt tag. So I'm going to go with this selected, go back up here to the tag tree. And when I open it this time, it looks a little different. We still have down here our tables, views, and stored procedures from the Northwind. But by default, Report Designer knows that you're going to reference a for each tag. So we have our for each tag right here, and we can tell it by the var categories. That's the name we changed, the variable name that we changed to. And so here is all that data from that for each loop that we can work with. So this first column is the category name. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. Okay, with that selected, I'm going to go up here and click preview to make sure what data we're working with. And here we are getting a category name from the categories table, exactly what we wanted. Okay, now I need to add another alt tag to display the description. So I'm going to go back up to the tags, choose alt tag. And again, we need to select the data we want to display. So with this alt tag selected, go back to the data tree. And under the var categories, we're going to choose description this time. And we have one more column, so let's add one more alt tag for the picture. Let's go ahead and select it. Go back up to the data tree and select picture. All right, we're almost done with our first table. So last thing we need to do is add the end for each tag to go with this beginning for each tag. And again, the end for each tag just tells Report Designer when to stop looping through the content between the beginning and the ending. All this content right here that we've added, the category name, description, and picture. So whenever you add a table, you'll want to put the end for each tag outside of the table. It's logical to put it right after this last alt tag in this table, but in actuality, so you don't create the list all in one line, you want to put the end for each tag outside of the table. So if my cursor down here, I'm going to go up to the tags and add an end for each tag. So again, this will just tell Report Designer when to stop looping through the data, when to stop displaying the category name, description, and picture. And we can even give this a nickname to make it easier to read, end for each. There we go. All right, well, we have a table created. And the cool thing about Word, about Report Designer, is that we support about 90% of Word's functionality. We don't support word art, so we don't suggest using it in your templates. You should use input tags if you want to bring in your images or logo. But since you are using Word, we can style this table any way we want. So can go up here. So with the table selected, I can go over here to the table tool, designs. We can keep it to have a header row. We don't need a first column. Banded rows are fine. Say we wanted to style this. we needed this to be a green table. I'm going to go ahead and select that. And as you can see here, that's how easy it is to style your tables. You can use full word ability to set it up. We're just using the tags to populate the data. Okay, now let's go ahead and output this just to see how it looks. So I'm going to go here to the auto tag, and you can either click on this output or there's this drop down. I'm going to go ahead and select that, and these are the different formats that you can output to. You can output to a docx, HTML, PDF, printer, or RTF. You cannot output to a PPTX, a PowerPoint, or XLSX, Excel, as these options don't cross platforms. So you would actually have to use Excel or PowerPoint if you wanted to output to these types. The default is docx. I'm going to go ahead and generate a docx. It'll ask me that the report needs to be saved. Do you want to save it? I'm going to say yes. Choose my desktop, save it. That's fine. Just overwrite it right there. Split the screen just so we can see this a little easier. We don't need that data bin no more, so I'm going to close that. So over here on the left is our template, and over here on the right is our output. And you can see we got the category names, the descriptions, and the pictures. We don't actually have the pictures just yet. This is the raw data from the database that is coming in. Let me show you how to actually display the pictures in this column. Close the output for a moment. So let's select this picture tag. And again, you can tell that we've selected an alt tag by this alt tag properties. And I'm going to go ahead and give this tag a type. So I'm going to click on this drop down, and you can assign different types to tags. You can give it a base 64 template, a bitmap, a date, hex template, number, PDF, template, text. But for a picture, we're going to go ahead and select bitmap. I could also change the size of the image by choosing this. But before I say anything on that, but you may have noticed that when I did select bitmap, this alt tag changed to an icon, and that's perfectly fine. And here we can change, assign different sizes to this picture. So I'm going to go ahead and just choose specified width. Now, before generating output, let's make sure that this picture tag is actually going to return a picture. So if it's selected, I'll click preview, and yep, here we go. We have an image now. Close that. Let's output this again just to make sure that the image is displaying in the output. Say yes, save, split the screen again. And here you can see we have now added pictures to our table. Okay. So we've just created our first table. Pretty simple, huh? The next thing I like to point out is that when you connect to your data source, you don't need to connect to just one. You can connect to multiple data sources at once, as well as different types. For example, we just connected to an SQL data source here. We could also connect to an XML. And we're actually going to do that right now. Let's go ahead and create another table. Let's add some text just so we can keep it separated from what we just worked on. So we're going to add a XML table to this view. Okay. First thing again, that when you create since we're going to connect to a new data source, we need to set that up. So I'm going to go back to the AutoTag Manager tab, and I'm going to go over to the Data Sources button. This time, you may notice that there is a green circle around this data sources, and that's just an indicator that you are connected to a data source already. go ahead and open this. And here you can still see the active Northwind SQL one. But let's go ahead and create a different data source. Let's use XML this time to connect to. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to choose XPath 2.0. We give you the option for XPath 1.0 and 2.0. XPath 2.0 just gives you the latest and greatest functions compared to XPath 1.0. I'm going to start this off by go ahead and creating a nickname for this. So this one will going to connect to the Northwind XML data source this time. So let's call this Northwind XML. So you can either type in a URL in this field, or you can actually browse to the file by clicking on this folder icon. I'm going to do that right now. And when you install Report Designer, you get in the documents this AutoTag folder. And here's where we have all of our data and templates. I have a bunch of backups, and these are just as the progressions go through. You may have these as well, but what I want to focus on is these two down here at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and select templates right now. Come down here and change this to all files. And so when you install Report Designer, we give you a whole bunch of sample templates that you can work with, that you can open and learn from or use as a beginning. We have a little over 200 samples that are installed, and we're always cleaning this up. Here you can see that we have a bunch of Word samples, but you also can go into folders that have Excel templates, Podified demo or pod templates, PowerPoint or tag templates. I'll go back to AutoTag though, because we need to connect to a data source and not just connect to templates. I'm going to choose data this time. And let's just change this to XML so we can just see only the XML files. And this time I said I was connected to the Northwind data source, so it's right here. I'm going to select it. Okay, once I've added this, I can add a protocol if I needed to. I could add a schema if I wanted to. For today, we don't need that, so we don't have to enter anything in that. As we're just going to be connecting to this data source without any of these additionals, let's go ahead and test it and see if we can connect. I click test down here. Yep, data source test succeeded. So I'm going to add this. And now here's our second data source, our Northwind XML. We still have connection to our Northwind SQL, but we've now just set up the connection for the Northwind XML. You can connect to as many data sources as you need. I've heard up to about 9 XML files being referenced in one template. But this is all we need to do right now for our new data source. So I'm going to go ahead and close the connection editor. And again, the data bin will open, and you may notice that it looks a little different. We still have our Northwind SQL tables and views, but now we have our Northwind XML data source that we can connect to. Here, it's a little different. As it's XML, you'll see the parent nodes and the child nodes. One thing I want to show you is that the Report Designer, there's another option when creating tables, and this is can help make things a lot easier for you. So let's say that we want to work with this employees table, and we need a populated table that has quite a bit of these columns. Instead of creating the table like we did for this SQL table over here, you can actually drag this table down to your template. And when you release the cursor, it gives you an option of setting up a table with these columns that you selected. We're not going to add all these tables right now, so we can go ahead and deselect all. But for this example, we're going to add the first name, the last name, but we actually want the first name first so we can reorder the columns as well. So now we have our first name, last name. We also want to bring in the hire date. And let's lastly bring in the country. So if the tables with the columns that we want to populate the table selected, when I click OK, Report Designer will create the table already for me, all with our for each tags, our out tags, and our end for each tags. Pretty slick, huh? So let's just clean this up a little. Let's add some spaces to this hetero. Okay, now let's just make sure that we're actually pulling in the data that we want to see. So I'm going to select this employees for each tag, go to AutoTag and click on the preview. And here, this preview is a lot different from our SQL preview. Because this is XML nodes as opposed to table columns that are formatted in a specific way. But you can still see that we're bringing back multiple records here. Okay, now if we preview this first name, let's make sure we are bringing back the first name. And here, yep, we're bringing back the first name. And here, Nancy, it's just the first in the list. Okay, now that the table is all set up, let's go ahead and style this table. Let's select it. Go back up to the table tool designs. Still keep the header row. We want banded row still. We don't want a first column. Let's make this one blue this time. All right. Now that we have our table set up and it looks like we're bringing in the data that we're looking for, let's go ahead and generate the output to see what this table is working like. Go up to the auto tag and generate output. Okay, let's split the screen again. Close this data bin. All right, here we still have our SQL table with our pictures and all the category records. And beneath this now is our XML table, styled as we chose, already populated without having to add the tags. One thing you may notice is this hire date. This hire date is the raw data that's actually coming in from the XML. We can make this a little more reader friendly though. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's close out the output. Select the hire date and go up to this alt tag property. We selected an alt tag. And this time we want to format this data to make it a little more reader friendly. So I'm going to click this format data button. And similar to Excel, you can format these. This is a date, so let's go ahead and choose a date style that within a format. Let's choose a long date format, sort of like that. All right, that's how we want. This is how we want our output to look. So with that, I'm going to apply it and close this. Let's go ahead and preview this again, just make sure we are getting what we're wanting. And yep, it's now formatted in a more reader-friendly fashion. Let's go ahead and output this. Say yes to save. Split the screen. And now we've formatted the date the way we wanted it to. We could have formatted the columns a little better, but as you can see now, we got the date in the format. All right. Oh, just noticed the time. I'm running a little late. Sorry. There's a couple more things that I want to point out. I think is important, so I'll kind of go through this. It won't take much time, but I still want to make sure we're covering. Sorry that running a little late. So now that we have our tables created, and those tables are pulling in all the information, what happens if we want to provide filtering before we generate the alpha ones if we don't want to see all these records, but want to filter it down some way. Well, one way to doing that, I'm not going to say the changes are just expanding this column. So one way to apply filtering is by using the input parameters in the auto tag over here on the left, input parameters. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, which opens up our define parameters box. And here's where I can actually define the parameters. So I'm going to click add to create an input parameter. And since we're going to be working with the categories table up here, let's go ahead and name this category. Okay, press enter. Here, I can say that it is required. We can give it a default value if we wanted. I know one of the categories, the category names is beverages. So let's go ahead and enter this. Okay, I do see some questions. I'll get to that at the end of the webinar. Please bear with me. Okay, so back to this input parameter. So we've just entered in a default, so we can have it always pre-populate. We can also change the types. If I click on this drop-down, we can have the input parameter be a currency, a date, integer, a number, a select, or a text. Select gives you an auto tag drop-down list to choose the value that you want from. For this example, we're just going to go with text type, so I'm going to do that. And with this filled out with our default, I'm going to go ahead and save it. So now, how do we utilize that input parameter to filter out our data? So I'm going to go ahead and select this categories for each tag. Come up here, click on this wizard button. And this, I've selected the wrong one. Sorry, I was down here. Select this categories and click on this wizard button. Okay, so this opens up our SQL wizard. And on this left side is our tables and our views that we have access to. In the center section, in this column part, is a list of all the columns that we're gathering from this for each tag, the category name, description, picture, etc. Below that is this sort section. So what if I want to sort by the category name? You can do that within this sort section. You do that by, let's go back to the categories table. So sort by category name. So all you would do is select it within the tables and drag it down here. Okay. So now you can see it's sorting category name by A to Z. And over here on the right, we give you a little data preview pane. And you can see here that the category names are being sorted alphabetically A to Z. We can change this, clicking on it, selecting Z to A, and you can see that the categories have switched from being listed in Z to A fashion. Okay, beneath this is the filter section or the SQL where clause. And this is used to filter out the data one way by using the input parameter that we just created. So I'm going to go ahead and click here to add a group. And then I'm going to click here to add a filter. So now we need to select what we want to filter by. So I'm going to click here to select the node. And we're going to be filtering by category name, as that was what we set up the input parameter for. So with that selected, I'll click OK. And here we are going to make the category name equal to. We could also change it to have it be a few other things, not equal to, null, does not start with, does not contain, but we're going to leave this at equal to. And here we're going to click here to set the value. And we're going to use this drop down And over here are all our parameters, our input parameters that we have created. Right now, we only have one created. So that's all we have listed, but if there was more, you would see more. So I'm going to go ahead and select the category. And our filter is now all set up to use the input parameter to filter by category names. And over here on the right, you can actually see that happening a little. We set the default to beverages, and now instead of having a full list, we only want to see the category, the records that have category name beverages. So we can see that our filtering is working. Okay, down here, I just want to point out a couple of things. You may have noticed that when we added this category name, that was added right here into this select statement. And so this area is actually grayed out. You cannot edit this section. This section is actually editable through the tag editor when you want to update this. We'll show you that in the intermediate training, but this is being built, this query is being built based on the information that we've entered in. Here we're selecting these categories, all these different columns, category ID, category name, description, and picture. We're bringing them in from the categories table. And we're selecting them where the category name equals this category variable. And you can tell variables by the $ and the squiggly brackets. And then here you can also see that our order by is category name. We have it descending in this case. We can change that to make it ascending, and you can see as we make changes here, this automatically updates our query. So this is actually a good place that if you don't know SQL query language and you want to learn it, you can use our wizard to populate it, and then the query you can see being built right here. So you can kind of learn how to create queries as you go along. Okay, now that we have our filtering set up, I want to go ahead and click OK. So now what's going to happen when we click output? Let's go ahead and try it and see. And now we actually, before we get the template, the output generated, we get a prompt. There could have been more variables if we had set up more input variables, but we only have one right now. It does have a default, so let's go ahead and keep that and see what the output happens. Okay, before our output had whole list of categories, now it's only showing one, just those records that have category name beverages. Our XML table is still here in its full form. We just added the input parameter to this SQL. Okay, so that's one way to filter dynamically by entering in values. But let me show you how to filter statically. And we'll use this XML table for our example this time. So I'm going to select this for each tag in our XML table. And I'm going to go up here to our wizard button. And this time it opens up our XPath wizard, a little different than an SQL wizard. And that's just because we're dealing with nodes and this little bit different setup. Again, we're just using XPath on this one. But at the bottom, you'll still see that XPath is being generated dynamically. Yeah, we're pulling, for this for each tag, we're pulling in the employees, all those employees. So what happens if we want to sort or set an order by on this XML table? We can go ahead and click here to add an order by. And here we are bringing in the employees. So we have all the nodes we want within the employees for each tag. And let's say we want to sort by first name. I'm going to go ahead and click on that first name right here. Choose OK. And over here on the right in our data preview, you can see that we're sorting by first name. So this first name is Andrew. Close that record. We'll see Ann is the next one, and then Janet, Laura, and so forth. If I was to change it to descending, you'll now see that Stephen is on top, and then Robert, Nancy. So you can see it's sorting in the order that we've chosen. Okay. So this was an exercise on filtering statically, and how do we do that with this XPath wizard? So you would come over here, and somewhat similar to the SQL wizard screen, you would click here to add a group, and you would now click here to add a condition, and click here to select the node. So this time, let's filter on the country. So I'm going to select that, and we only want to now see those employees whose country equals, but we could also choose other options instead of equal. But we do want to go with equal on this one. And this is where we set our value by click here to set a value. And we only want to display those employees whose country is listed as UK. So I enter that indirectly into that field. And when I press OK, you'll see down here that our query has been updated, where the employees whose will display those employees whose country equals UK. Okay. So we have all this set up right now. So let's go ahead and click OK. And let's go ahead and generate the output to see how this will now look. Okay, we've already seen beverages. Let's switch this up a little. Let's change this to seafood. Okay, split the screen. Okay, and now here, the SQL table, we're just only displaying those records that have a category name seafood based on that input parameter. And down here in our XML table, we're only displaying those records, those 4 records, where the country is UK. So that's how you can filter your data either dynamically using input parameters or statically by entering in a specific value. Okay, again, sorry, went over a little bit. Just go through the slides just to make sure I didn't miss anything. So, okay, we went over the SQL and the XPath wizards, and I showed you how to sort dynamically and statically using different type of filters. We went over the input parameters, which allows you to add input just before generating output. We added a default value, showed you how to reference that input parameter in the tag and what the prompt for that value looks like. Okay, you may want to take a screenshot of this slide while we're on it, if you can, as here are some of the resources that you can utilize. If you need to contact us, you can always go to windwardstudios.com/user-support-center. That has a lot of information in there, tutorials, ways to create support tickets. It's a rather useful web page when needing support. If you want to look up something yourself, you can always feel free to do that in our knowledge base. We're actually creating and have recently released a new knowledge base, but it's not fully populated yet. We're working on that, but it's got quite a bit of articles. But and that new knowledge base is located at ohana.windwardstudios.com. If you can't find what you're looking for in there, you may want to look at our old wiki, which is at our old knowledge base, which is at wiki.windward.net. If you can't find what you're looking for in either the new knowledge base or wiki, You can always feel free to reach out to our amazing support team at support.windwardstudios.com, or you can always email them at support@windwardstudios.com. So if you have a question that you can't find the answer to, you can go ahead and contact our support team and be glad to help you. If you need to retrieve your license keys, if you need to go from your temporary to your permanent, you can do that at store.windward.net. And if you want any changes to the product or have any feature requests that you want to see added to either the engine or the report designer, you can do that at ideas.windward.net. Okay. Next week, I mentioned that there will be an intermediate training webinar. In this webinar, we'll go over more advanced for each tag techniques, show you how to do column-based expansion instead of just row-based, show you how to hide and show specific things by utilizing the if-else tags and the switch case tags. And this can conditionally format your output. So if you wanted to show some text in red or fill in a table cell with a certain color, I'll show you how to do that. And last thing, we're now at our Q&A session. There will be a survey at the end of this webinar. Please feel free to fill it out truthfully. Any feedback that you can provide will not only help me, but any attendees with the next webinar. So I did see that a couple of questions have been asked, so I'm going to go ahead and read them for a moment, and I will address them right now for you. Yeah, okay. Yes, the question is, you mentioned that we can create Excel SX files. Is Windward compatible with Excel? And can we create reports on Excel? Yes, you can. You absolutely can. You can create reports not only with Word, but you can create them with Excel as well as PowerPoint. There's more information on that in our wiki. But let's see if you have a moment, I'll kind of show you just quickly, just a real quick example of an Excel table output. So let's go ahead. Again, first thing, we'll need to connect to our data source. So this time, since this is new, we don't have anything connected. You'll see a yellow triangle before we saw a green circle. So we need to connect to data. So let's go ahead and connect to a data source. Let's just go ahead and use one of these that we've looked at earlier. So I'm going to just choose the Northwind SQL one. Just test it to make sure it did succeed. So let's go ahead and connect to it. Okay, so now that I'm connected to a data source, let's go ahead and close this. Okay, this again will just be a very simple one, but I just wanted to show you that yes, it is possible. So we got the data source connected. Let's add a tag. Let's, for each tag, let's give that for each tag some data to connect to. Let's go back to the categories table. Okay, now that we have our for each tag, we want to add some output so we can see. So one thing that is different about Excel is, say we want to add the tag here, we would highlight this column, choose an alt tag, and we get this prompt to say, where would you like to insert the tag? Here, we obviously want to put it after the for each tag, so I'll just click anywhere after it. And when I do that, you'll see that the alt tag is here. I'm going to go ahead and add data to this alt tag now. So I'm going to select that, hit data tree to add the data. Actually, let me show you one thing before we do that. Maybe I have to select it. Oh, let's just do that. Say you need to go back and change that, you can always do a select tag, and this column has 2 tags in it. If you needed to work on the for each tag, you could select that one, or if you wanted to do the alt tag, you can select that one. I'm going to go ahead and do that this time. Change this up to display the description. Now we need to add the end for each tag. Did that there. Let's generate output. See how this looks. It'll ask to save it. I'm just going to save it to the desktop. And here you can see you can generate output using Excel. Very good question. Very good question. Okay. Hope that answered your question. Oh, I see one more question. Is it with the same license? Yes, yes it is. The same license that you set up in Word gets transferred over, also set up in Excel and PowerPoint. I can come into the AutoTag Manager and actually show it to you right here. So, yep, same license that I used in Word can be used in Excel and PowerPoint as well. Good questions. You are very much welcome. Okay, see that's all the questions we have right now. Okay, that's all the questions we have right now. So I want to thank you all for your time. I'm sorry I went over a little, and then thank you for sticking around as we work through a little Excel, just so I could show you that our product does work in Excel. Well, thank you all for joining. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and goodbye now.